weeks ago, I had several people asking me about what I thought about who was doing a good job reporting on Ebola and who wasn't. And when I sat down to actually start looking at all of the different stories that were being written, I ended up coming up with a completely different thing than what the people have been asking me for, which was a collection of ideas that kind of told me something about both how the media works and how the media functions as a part of society as opposed to something that just tells society things. You know, it's not just outside society, it's part of society itself. So I wanted to talk about those 3 lessons that I came away with real fast. The first is that the history of media has shaped what media actually is now. And that's not just media in the terms of news, that's also media in the terms of movies and TV shows, and all the things that we, the writers and the readers, consume and bring to the table when we see new news. So this is a video graphic from the Dallas Morning News, and you'll notice it looks an awful lot like a zombie movie horror poster, which infuriates me, but it is part of what the baggage that we're bringing to the reporting that we're doing is the last 15 years of zombie movie madness, as well as, before that, books that were a big part of the public consciousness. So if you've ever read The Hot Zone, or if you've ever seen the movie Outbreak, well, the reporters that are covering this saw those same things and read those same things, and tropes that come from that media influence what the reporters write about today. So the idea of that, you know, all Ebola patients die in this cinematic, horrible, bleeding out sort of way isn't true, but comes from what we all learned watching Outbreak and reading The Hot Zone. It also ends up influencing what kind of reporting we can and can't do. So if we have all the people we're writing for are concerned about the things that they learned watching horror movies, we have to address those things rather than other stories that maybe are more important and are maybe more accurate, but we can't get around to before we debunk the other stuff first. Another thing that we need to pay attention to is that how we consume media shapes what we think a story is and what we think the quality of the coverage is. So it's not just who is doing the reporting and how good of a job they're doing, it's where they're doing it. Right now, 42% of our media consumption time in the US goes to television, and some of the absolute worst reporting on Ebola has been from TV. You know, you have things like local TV news in Atlanta following the ambulance that was bringing doctors to the hospital there like it was the O.J. Simpson car chase. You've got the way that CNN has been covering a lot of the stuff in Texas has just been ridiculous, but that's where most Americans are getting their news coming from. And meanwhile, you have really great reporting happening. Helen Branswell with the Canadian Wire Service is one of the absolute best reporters writing about this, but only 6% of us get our media time in print. Or 6% of our media time, rather, goes to print. And there's lots of good reporting happening online and in blogs, but 38% of our media time goes to mobile and the web combined. And that's largely going to places like yahoo.com, not to the tiny little blogs that are doing really good reporting on this, but just don't have a really good, you know, base of people to draw from. And the final thing that's important to pay attention to is that our expectations and writers' expectations end up shaping what we think the story is and how we cover that story. And I think a really good example of this is when we write stories and we look for stories that tell us that this is about a virus. It's not really about a virus. The virus is just this one thing that plays into this larger issue that involves healthcare disparities, that involves centuries of colonization, that involves all of this historical context and social context that is the real story rather than the virus. But we report on it like it is the virus because that's what we went in expecting it to be about. So some of the worst reporting that I've seen is the stuff that doesn't challenge the reporters or the readers' previous expectations about what it is that they're learning about. So I'm out of time, but
I 17 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to talk a little bit more about you know, how these kind of tropes shape what we think we're going to be getting from media, and then what the media is actually giving us, and how we get the stuff that actually breaks out of those molds in front of people's faces more, given the limitations of what people are paying attention to.